For centuries, Earth was nothing more than a forgotten speck in the galaxy, a planet of no consequence. But when the mightiest fleets of the universe turned their eyes toward us, convinced we were an easy target, they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated the power of humanity. Now, as we study the ruins of the last fleet that dared to challenge us, a terrifying truth is emerging. Earth is not the fragile outpost the galaxy once thought it was. It's something far more dangerous, something the universe was never prepared for. It started with a low hum, a faint ripple in the fabric of the cosmos, barely noticeable, yet impossible to ignore. The first signs were subtle, a shift in communications traffic, a slight disruption in navigational systems. But over the course of several days, the signs grew clearer, sharper. Something was wrong, and the galaxy's collective attention snapped toward Earth. It had been centuries since any alien civilization had truly taken an interest in our small corner of the universe. Humanity had risen from the ashes of countless wars, from the brink of extinction, to become a thriving, albeit still young, spacefaring species. The great galactic empires, some ancient, others far more recent, had long regarded us as a curiosity, a potential future ally, or a troublesome pest. But no one had considered us a real threat. Not until that moment. At first, it was the Hadran Collective, a faction of ruthless warlords whose empire spanned thousands of star systems. They were the first to move, launching their fleet in a sweeping advance across the galaxy. Their ships were vast, impossibly powerful, armed with weapons that could turn moons into asteroids. They believed they could crush Earth's fragile colonies with ease. Their intel on us, gathered over years of observation, suggested that we were primitive, barely a match for even the most modest of their military assets. But they had no idea what they were walking into. The fleet's arrival was the first in a string of coordinated assaults. In swift succession, the Vrex Dominion, merciless conquerors from a distant quadrant, and the Sultai Consortium, brilliant tacticians known for their cold, calculating strikes, both announced their intentions to join the offensive against Earth. Each empire had its own reasons for wanting to erase our presence from the galactic stage, but all of them shared one common belief: humanity was a weak species, unworthy of survival. They were about to prove their superiority in ways they thought would leave no room for doubt. What they didn't realize was that Earth had been quietly preparing for this moment. For years, humans had been building something more than just weapons, more than just defensive systems. We were studying our enemies, learning their tactics, and adapting our own technology to match theirs. For every invasion we repelled, for every defeat we suffered, humanity had one single trait that kept us going: an unyielding desire to survive, to protect our home, to never give up. It was this very spirit that the galaxy had failed to comprehend. When the Hadran fleet arrived, their ships encircled Earth's system, locking down all possible exits. Their flagship, the Hadran Titan, was a behemoth that dwarfed anything we'd seen before. Armed with devastating energy weapons and massive defensive shields, it was designed to destroy entire planets. We knew the odds were slim, but humanity's resolve was never one to back down. The battle started as expected. Our forces, although vastly inferior, fought with the ferocity of a species that had nothing to lose. The first few hours were a blur of explosions, energy beams, and desperate strategies. It was clear that the Hadran didn't believe they had anything to worry about. Their fleet swarmed like a hive of predators, striking with precision and overwhelming firepower. And for a moment, it seemed as though we might falter. But then, something shifted. Humanity's ingenuity, often overlooked by the galactic powers, began to shine through. The weapons we had developed, the ones we had kept hidden in plain sight, started to turn the tide. Our ships, though fewer in number, were faster, more nimble than the Hadran's lumbering behemoths. We had discovered ways to hack into their systems, to disrupt their communication networks, to blind their weapons long enough to strike back. In the midst of the chaos, we launched a series of devastating counterattacks, targeting weak points that no one, not even the Hadran themselves, had thought to defend. The Titan, their flagship, was the first to fall. Its shields were breached, its main reactor overloaded. The Hadran were unprepared for the speed and precision of our tactics, and they paid for it dearly. Panic began to spread across their ranks as their fleet started to crumble. The Vrex and Sultai, once poised to join the fight, found themselves caught off guard, their own fleets hesitating, unsure of how to proceed. What followed was an unbelievable chain of events. The Hadran flagship exploded in a flash of brilliant light, sending shockwaves through the fleet. In the wake of that destruction, we struck at the heart of their forces, tearing through their remaining ships with surgical strikes. The Vrex Dominion, watching in disbelief, turned tail and fled, their once mighty warships scattering like dust before the storm. The Sultai, usually the most composed of strategists, found themselves scrambling to reorganize in the face of the chaos. By the time the battle had ended, Earth's fleet was battered and broken, but it was standing. The enemy fleets, on the other hand, had been devastated. The Hadran were the first to retreat, but they weren't the only ones. The Vrex and the Zaltai, their own ships left in tatters, soon followed, licking their wounds and plotting their next move. As we surveyed the wreckage of the battlefield, a chilling realization began to set in. The galaxy was watching, and what they saw that day would change everything. The greatest empires in the universe had underestimated Earth, and now we were a force to be reckoned with. In the days following the victory, Earth's colonies rallied, their fleets uniting in ways no one had imagined possible. We were not just survivors, we were emboldened, stronger, more determined than ever. But as we surveyed the wreckage left by the fleets of the Hadran Collective, the Vrex Dominion, and the Saltai Consortium, it became clear that the aftermath of this battle held far more questions than answers. What had just happened? How had we humanity managed to repel forces far more advanced than our own, forces that had once been considered invincible? The first signs of what we had done started to show themselves as we began to examine the wreckage. The ships of the Hadran fleet were massive, beyond anything we'd seen before. They had once been the pride of their empire, each one a masterpiece of engineering, capable of laying waste to entire worlds. But now they were shattered hulks drifting aimlessly in space, the remains of their once gleaming surfaces scorched beyond recognition. It was as though their very hulls had been torn open from the inside out, as if they had been struck by some unimaginable force. In the weeks that followed, teams of human engineers and military experts began the painstaking task of salvaging what they could from the wrecks. Their objective wasn't just to collect technology, it was to understand what had happened, to decode the mysteries of the enemy fleets, and to figure out how we had won when every logical calculation had predicted our defeat. It wasn't just the battle that fascinated us, but the very nature of what had occurred. How could a small planet like Earth, with its primitive technology, take down the most powerful empires in the galaxy? The ships we recovered were unlike anything we'd ever encountered. Their weapons, their shielding technology, their advanced propulsion systems, all of it was far ahead of what we could achieve. The Hadran alone had weapons that could reduce a moon to rubble in seconds, yet in the final moments of the battle, their systems had completely failed them. Their shields had cracked under the weight of our attacks, their engines had exploded in a cascade of fire and metal, and their once impenetrable armor had buckled with ease. The technology itself wasn't just damaged, it was broken in ways that suggested something more than simple battle damage. The scientists aboard the recovery ships were the first to make a disturbing observation. Something had gone terribly wrong with the Hadran fleet's internal systems. The damage wasn't just caused by our weapons, it seemed as if their ships had turned against them, like some unseen hand had manipulated their very structure, tearing them apart from within. And then it became clear it wasn't just the Hadran who had been affected. The Vrex ships, which were known for their unyielding defensive systems, had experienced similar failures. Their energy shields, normally impervious to any attack, had collapsed under an unknown force. The Exaltai, the galaxy's most brilliant tacticians, had watched in disbelief as their once pristine vessels were consumed by flames, their advanced weaponry malfunctioning at the most crucial moments. As the scientists pored over the data, one thing became painfully obvious. This wasn't just a military victory for Earth. It was a catastrophe for every empire that had dared challenge us. And the most chilling part was that we hadn't even meant to cause this. We hadn't intentionally sabotaged their ships. No, something had triggered this destruction, something within us, within Earth, something so ancient and so powerful that it had shattered the fleets of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Days turned into weeks as we continued to study the wreckage. But it wasn't until we cracked the final encryption codes from the Hadran flagship that the truth began to emerge. Hidden deep within the heart of the Titan, their flagship was a series of encrypted messages. At first, they appeared to be routine military logs detailing the status of the fleet, their weaponry, and their tactical movements. But as we dug deeper, we discovered something more sinister. The logs told the story of a civilization that had come to Earth with the full intention of wiping it out. And yet, they had known right before the battle had begun that something was off. The captain of the Titan had recorded a final message just before the fleet had plunged into battle. It was a warning. "I don't understand," the message began, its words filled with disbelief. "We thought we understood humanity. We thought we had prepared for this. But something is wrong. We've underestimated them. Earth is not like anything we've ever faced before. It's as though the very planet itself has been preparing for us. No, preparing for this moment." The captain's words were vague, almost frantic, but they carried a weight of finality. Whatever they have, whatever power lies dormant within them, it's awakened. And it's unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. We can't win this battle. We never could. The message cut off abruptly after that, but it was enough to send chills down the spines of everyone who heard it. The Hadran, with their advanced technology and vast fleets, had failed to conquer Earth not because they lacked the means, but because they had faced something that no one could have predicted, the untapped power of humanity. What that power was, we still didn't fully understand. But as we continued to study the wreckage and piece together the events of that fateful day, one thing became clear: Earth had done more than survive. We had fought back with something far more potent than just weaponry or tactics. We had tapped into a force that even the galaxy's greatest empires couldn't comprehend. And as the wreckage of the fleets drifted in the silent void, the galaxy would soon realize that Earth was no longer the weak, unworthy planet it had once been. We had become something far more dangerous, and the universe would learn to fear us. As the weeks passed, Earth scientists and military engineers continued their meticulous study of the wreckage. Every fragment of alien technology was analyzed, every broken ship was stripped down to its core. But as we dug deeper into the ruins, the questions only grew more complex. We had expected to find answers about the weapons and tactics that had allowed us to succeed. Instead, we found something far more unsettling. The real story of our victory was not written in the advanced tech we had scavenged, but in the inexplicable failures of the enemy fleets and in the subtle, almost invisible power that had tipped the scales in our favor. It wasn't just the Hadran Vrex or Sultai who had been affected by the battle, it was their very technology. The Hadran's flagship, once thought to be an invulnerable symbol of their military supremacy, had been reduced to a charred husk, its once impenetrable shields shattered by some unknown force. The same was true for the Vrex and Sultai ships. Their defensive systems, which had been able to withstand direct hits from stellar-level weaponry, had failed in the face of our seemingly simple attacks. It was as though the ships had been sabotaged from within, energy systems malfunctioned, weapons misfired, and entire hulls buckled under the strain of battle in ways no one could explain. The engineers who were examining the wreckage began to piece together a disturbing theory. This wasn't mere luck or superior tactics on our part. There was something more at play, something that had affected the very core of the enemy fleets. They hadn't been defeated by better weaponry or more advanced strategies. They had been crippled by an unforeseen factor that no one had prepared for. It wasn't until a small group of scientists stumbled upon a strange phenomenon in the data logs that things started to make sense. Deep within the wreckage of the Hadran flagship, buried beneath layers of scorched metal and damaged circuitry, they found a trace signature of faint, recurring pulse emanating from Earth's moon. At first, the signal was dismissed as a glitch, an artifact of the battle itself. But the more we studied it, the clearer it became that this signal wasn't random. It was intentional. A deliberate transmission hidden within the electromagnetic radiation surrounding the moon. The pattern was unmistakable. It was an old code, one that dated back millennia, a relic of a time long before Earth had even known how to harness the power of space travel. The scientists who worked on deciphering it were shocked when they discovered the truth. The signal was a warning, a message buried deep within Earth's history. It wasn't something we had deliberately created or activated. It was part of our genetic code, an ancient trigger that had been waiting to be unlocked, waiting for the right moment. And that moment had arrived. The signal was a remnant of an ancient civilization that had once thrived on Earth, long before humanity as we knew it had emerged. These beings, who had vanished from history thousands of years ago, had left behind a power so profound, so alien, that it had become part of the very fabric of Earth itself. The message that had been transmitted from the moon wasn't a warning of attack or invasion. It was a signal designed to activate something deep within our biology, a hidden potential, an untapped energy that lay dormant in every human. For generations, we had lived unaware of this hidden legacy. Our ancestors had never understood what they carried within them, and we had unknowingly carried it with us into space. But now, with the enemy fleets at our door, something inside us had been awakened. It wasn't just our will to survive, it was something more. Something biological, something ancient. As the realization spread, fear began to take root. The Hadran and the other empires had underestimated humanity for centuries. They had believed us to be a fractured, primitive species, barely worthy of attention. But now we had something far more dangerous at our disposal, something that no one had anticipated. The question that began to arise was not just how we had defeated the fleets, but what else this power could mean for humanity. If Earth had always held the potential to unlock such a force, then what other aspects of our biology remained undiscovered? What other hidden abilities lay dormant within us, waiting for the right moment to emerge? And more troubling still, what would the galaxy do once they realized that the small, insignificant planet they had ignored for so long was no longer a harmless anomaly? The more we studied the wreckage, the more we discovered. The enemy fleets had been weakened not just by our weapons or our tactics, but by the very fact that they had come into contact with a power they had no understanding of. The energy that had disrupted their ships was not something we had consciously harnessed. It was a biological trigger, a latent potential that had been hidden in our DNA for millennia. And now that it had been awakened, it was growing stronger with every passing day. The galactic empires had always believed that their advanced technology and superior tactics made them unstoppable. They had conquered and destroyed countless civilizations across the galaxy. But they had never counted Earth. They had never counted on humanity's true strength, a strength that went far beyond our ability to survive. It was a strength that had been lying dormant within us for eons, waiting to be unleashed. And now that it had been triggered, the entire galaxy would have to reckon with the fact that Earth was no longer just a small, insignificant planet on the edge of the universe. We had become something far more dangerous, something the galaxy had never seen before. And we were just getting started. As the weeks turned into months, the aftermath of the battle began to shift from triumph to something far more complex. Humanity had emerged victorious. But that victory had come at a cost, one we hadn't fully understood at the time. The ancient power within us, once dormant and buried beneath the layers of time, was growing. No one could explain it fully, but the changes were undeniable. People spoke of strange dreams, unexplained bursts of energy, and an almost instinctive sense of knowing things they hadn't learned. It was as if the very essence of humanity had been altered, and the galaxy had no idea what it was about to face. The remnants of the enemy fleets continued to drift in the cold void, the wreckage of the Hadran, Wreckage, and Saltai slowly decaying. But the more we studied those ruins, the more questions emerged. There were things we couldn't explain, things that defied all known science. The destruction of the fleets had been catastrophic, and while our engineers had done their best to salvage any usable technology, the deeper we delved into the alien wreckage, the clearer it became. The damage had not just been physical. It was as though their ships had been unmade, torn apart at a molecular level, as if the very foundation of their technology had been rewritten by some force they could neither comprehend nor control. But the truth of what had happened was still out of reach. We had only a vague understanding of the power that had shifted the tide in our favor. Our scientists theorized that it wasn't just a biological trait that had been unlocked within us, it was a kind of consciousness. A collective awareness deep within the human race had suddenly awakened. It was as if humanity had been living with a secret weapon embedded in our very genes, and now that weapon had been activated. The power wasn't just physical, it was something more subtle, more pervasive. It was connected to every human, every colony, every individual. The more we tried to comprehend it, the more elusive it seemed. The first signs that Earth's new power was becoming a force unto itself came when we began receiving reports from our colonies at the edges of the solar system. Strange phenomena were occurring. Systems that had always been stable suddenly went haywire, and colonies that had been isolated for years began experiencing unprecedented spikes in energy output. At first, these anomalies were dismissed as equipment malfunctions or environmental fluctuations, but the incidents continued to grow in scale and frequency, and soon they were impossible to ignore. By the time the first interstellar distress signal was received, it was clear that something far more dangerous was emerging. The signal came from one of our deep space research stations, stationed just outside the Kuiper Belt. The crew there had been studying a series of energy fluctuations, anomalies in the cosmic background radiation that had been detected in the weeks following the battle. The fluctuations had initially been traced to Earth's moon, where the strange, ancient signal had been originating. But now the anomalies were growing more erratic. They were expanding, rippling outward like the shockwaves of a star being born. The distress signal was brief but chilling. We're not alone. The signal, it's growing. Whatever we've triggered on Earth, it's not just affecting us, it's reaching out. It's coming for us. The message was cut off before any further details could be transmitted, but it was enough. Our deepest fears had been realized. The power that had awakened on Earth was no longer confined to the planet, it was radiating outward, expanding into the reaches of the solar system. It was as if Earth had become a beacon, a focal point for something vast and unknown, drawing the attention of forces beyond our comprehension. And then, just as quickly as the message had come, the anomalies began to increase exponentially. The colonies near the outer rim of our solar system reported unusual occurrences, strange lights in the sky, disturbances in the fabric of space itself. It was as though the very laws of physics were being rewritten, subtly altered by the mysterious force emanating from Earth. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. What was even more alarming was that the energy surges weren't just confined to the colonies. They began to manifest on Earth itself. People spoke of flashes of light, strange dreams, and heightened senses. Some reported hearing voices, whispers that seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The power was spreading, growing stronger, and with each passing day the boundaries of reality itself seemed to warp. We had unknowingly awakened something that not only altered our biology, but began to interfere with the very fabric of the universe around us. The government scrambled to respond, sending ships to investigate the deep space stations and the colonies where the phenomena had first been detected. But as the ships departed, something unprecedented occurred. A massive distortion appeared at the edge of the solar system, an energy field so intense that it began to distort the path of every ship that ventured near it. It was as though the solar system itself was being drawn into a gravitational pull, a force not of physics but of something far more abstract, far more powerful. With each passing day, the truth became clearer. We weren't just dealing with a latent biological power. The power that had been triggered by our victory over the fleets was not just a hidden part of humanity, it was the key to something far larger, a force that had been dormant for eons, waiting for humanity to reach a threshold. And now that we had crossed it, there was no going back. The galaxy had once looked at Earth as a backwater, insignificant and unworthy of attention. But now the tides had turned. What had once been seen as a weak and fractured species had become the center of an energy storm, a force capable of altering the balance of power in the entire universe. And as the signal from Earth spread, as the power that had awakened within us continued to grow, one undeniable truth became clear: humanity had just changed the course of history. And the galaxy, for better or worse, would never be the same again. The disturbance at the edge of the solar system continued to grow, its intensity increasing with each passing day. No one could deny it any longer. Whatever had been unleashed on Earth was not just a biological change, it was a cosmic event. The strange energy that was now rippling outward from our planet was creating disruptions that no one, not even our most advanced scientists, could fully explain. The fabric of reality itself was being warped, like an invisible force was pressing against the edges of space-time. Colonies that had once been self-sustaining were now experiencing frequent system failures. Communications were increasingly erratic, with entire ships reporting interference on their navigational systems. Those closest to the distortion at the outer rim of the solar system were the first to feel the effects. Space travel, once an everyday affair, had become treacherous. Navigational beacons failed, and the stars themselves seemed to shift, as though the constellations were subtly changing in real time. Earth's government had set up an emergency task force to investigate, but even the brightest minds of the Federation were struggling to make sense of what was happening. The best and brightest scientists we had could only offer theories. Some suggested the energy pulses were a natural phenomenon, an accidental byproduct of the ancient power that had been awakened. Others feared that the pulses were a message, a signal from a civilization older than our own, one that had left Earth's hidden legacy waiting for us to uncover it. But one thing was certain: this wasn't something we had control over, and the consequences were unfolding faster than anyone could keep up with. The military was now on high alert. The same fleets that had fought so bravely to defend Earth now found themselves on standby, preparing for something no one could name. Our technology, once the key to humanity's defense, now felt fragile in the face of the overwhelming force that was swelling around us. We were no longer simply defending ourselves from external threats. We were now facing a force of our own making, one that could shape the destiny of not just Earth, but the entire galaxy. But it wasn't just the military and government that were beginning to feel the effects of the energy surge. Ordinary citizens, once untouched by the wider struggles of the galaxy, were now beginning to experience strange and unexplainable phenomena. People in major cities reported vivid dreams of things they had never seen, of star systems far beyond their reach. Some spoke of an overwhelming sense of déjà vu, as if they had lived their lives countless times before. Others claimed to hear whispers in their minds, voices that seemed to call them towards something, though they couldn't say what. The government tried to calm the populace, assuring everyone that they were investigating the situation, but the fear was palpable. People began to wonder if the universe was reacting to us, whether the galaxy's oldest civilizations were now aware that Earth had tapped into something far beyond their comprehension. If this energy was indeed a call, what would answer it? And what consequences would humanity face if the power we had awakened began to grow beyond our control? The deeper the investigations went, the more complex the situation became. Earth scientists found evidence that the energy surges were not merely emanating from Earth. The anomalies were spreading outward in a pattern that seemed deliberate, as though someone or something was guiding the flow of energy. The energy waves were not random, they were targeted, moving along specific paths, and as they did, they seemed to react to the presence of other ships or stations. The stations closest to the energy's origin had gone silent, their transmissions cut off entirely, and it was feared that they had been pulled into whatever anomaly was unfolding. One of the most unsettling developments occurred when a research vessel, the Saratoga, disappeared while investigating a particularly intense fluctuation near the Oort cloud. The crew had sent their last transmission moments before they vanished, a report indicating that they were about to enter a massive energy field. "It's like we're being pulled in," the captain had said. "There's a force here, something alive." That transmission was the last anyone heard from them. The disappearance of the Saratoga only deepened the sense of dread that had begun to settle over Earth. There was now no doubt that this was not just a planetary phenomenon. This was something larger, something that transcended anything humanity had ever faced. Some began to speculate that the energy surges were a signal, one that could draw the attention of ancient civilizations far beyond our understanding. Perhaps the civilizations we had thought were long extinct weren't gone at all. Perhaps they were watching us, and our sudden rise was part of some ancient plan that we could not yet comprehend. With the military now facing the possibility of alien forces arriving on Earth's doorstep, a new kind of urgency swept through humanity. Scientists and engineers from around the world were called upon to work together, pooling all available resources to understand the forces at play. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about understanding what Earth had become, what this newfound power meant for us, and whether we were ready for the consequences that would come with it. As humanity grappled with the new reality, it became evident that we were no longer alone in the universe. The energy surges had begun to affect more than just our own solar system. A massive shockwave, powered by the surges, had begun to ripple out into the galaxy, creating disturbances in distant star systems. The fleets of other empires, the same ones that had once considered Earth inconsequential, were now taking notice. But what could they do? What could any of them do in the face of a force that could bend reality itself? And so the universe was left waiting, watching, as Earth stood at the center of a growing storm, one that had been unleashed by humanity's own hands, and one that no one could predict the outcome of. The question wasn't whether Earth had the power to change the galaxy, it was whether humanity, as a species, could survive the awakening of this ancient force and what might come in the wake of its arrival. The shockwave of energy continued to ripple outward, pushing deeper into the galaxy, and the tension on Earth had reached a boiling point. We were living in a fragile moment, where each passing day brought with it the possibility of discovery or disaster. The very thing that had once been seen as a blessing, a dormant power awakened within humanity, had now become a threat. Governments scrambled to coordinate responses, to understand the implications of the expanding force, and to prepare for whatever might emerge from the void of space. But the reality was that no one knew what to expect. As more energy surges moved through the galaxy, even the most advanced civilizations began to notice them. The once distant and detached empires of the galaxy had been alerted. Some reacted with curiosity, some with fear, but all were forced to confront the fact that Earth was no longer a backwater planet. The very power we had triggered was altering the balance of the universe. Our previous isolation had ended, and we were no longer invisible. The first to approach Earth in response to the disturbances were the Wreckage, the same species whose warships had once been torn apart by our surprise victory. Their fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, their ships slowly making their way toward Earth. It was a cautious approach, one born of fear and uncertainty. The Wreckage had always prided themselves on their technological superiority, but now they found themselves at the mercy of something they could neither comprehend nor control. They had seen the devastation we were capable of, and now they were coming to us not as conquerors but as seekers of answers. And yet, even as the Wreckage prepared to make contact, something even more extraordinary occurred. These Sholtai, long-standing rivals of the Wreckage, appeared on the other side of the solar system. The Exultai were known for their ruthless efficiency in battle, their fleets always a formidable force. But they, too, were not immune to the gravitational pull of the energy surges. Their ships arrived with weapons primed, but it was clear from the moment they entered our system that they were just as perplexed as the Wreckage. The galaxy, once divided and fragmented, now found itself drawn toward Earth. Whether they came as allies or potential foes, they were all equally desperate for understanding. It was no longer a question of whether humanity could survive, we had proven that, but a question of what these galactic powers would do once they realized that Earth had tapped into something they couldn't hope to match. In the meantime, Earth's own leaders were grappling with an increasingly unstable situation. The energy surges had reached a critical threshold, and the very fabric of space-time seemed to be starting to tear at the edges. Entire star systems were beginning to lose their cohesion, and the universe itself was beginning to buckle under the pressure. The distortions were starting to have more pronounced effects, causing the stars themselves to flicker like dying embers. Space was warping, and even our understanding of time began to feel unreliable. Scientists began reporting that the laws of physics were breaking down in localized regions, and that entire fleets were being swallowed by the very fabric of space itself. On Earth, the once subtle changes to human biology had become more apparent. Some people had begun to develop extraordinary abilities, powers that defied all logic. Those who had been attuned to the ancient signals spoke of strange visions, of communicating with something outside of themselves, of tapping into knowledge that had been long lost to human history. The power wasn't just some isolated force that had altered our biology. It was something much more profound. It was as though the boundaries between our consciousness and the universe itself were thinning. Some began to speak of the awakening as though it were the beginning of a new era for humanity, an era where we would become something more than we ever thought possible. But with this new power came new fears. If we were evolving into something new, something greater, what would we become? And if the galaxy's most powerful empires were beginning to take notice of us, what would they do in response? What lengths would they go to contain a force they didn't understand? It was clear that Earth was no longer a quiet, inconsequential speck on the map of the universe. We had become a player of force that even the most advanced civilizations could not ignore. It was only a matter of time before the first official diplomatic contact was made. The Wrecks, with their cautious approach, were the first to reach out. Their ships entered the Earth's atmosphere in silence, and their ambassadors arrived in neutral territory, a barren moon on the edge of the solar system. It was here that the leaders of Earth met with the Wrecks' emissaries, with the rest of the galaxy's great powers, watching from a distance. The meeting was tense, filled with more questions than answers. The Wrecks had no answers for the phenomenon that had shaken their fleets. They had no explanation for the inexplicable energy surges or the strange disruptions in their technology. But they had one simple request. They wanted to know what Earth had done. They wanted to understand the source of the power we had tapped into, and more importantly, how it could be controlled. It was then that we began to realize the true scale of what we had unleashed. The energy surges were not a one-time event. They were a trigger, a beacon for something far greater, something that could change the course of the galaxy forever. The very thing humanity had awakened could either be the salvation or the destruction of all that we knew. And it was then, in the silence that followed the Wrecks' request, that the question echoed through the minds of every leader present: could humanity control this power? Or had we, in our thirst for survival, unleashed something that no one could ever hope to tame? The galaxy was waiting, and the stakes had never been higher. Earth was no longer the hunter, it had become the hunted. And no one knew what would happen when the forces that were now drawing close arrived at our doorstep. As the days passed, Earth's atmosphere grew thick with tension. The arrival of the Wrecks and Saxoltai fleets marked the beginning of a new chapter for humanity, a chapter where we were no longer the underdogs, struggling to survive, but rather the center of a cosmic storm, with the entire galaxy now watching and waiting. Diplomatic efforts fraught with fear and uncertainty took place in secret behind closed doors, while humanity itself stood at the edge of a precipice, unsure of what the future held. The power we had awakened, this strange, incomprehensible force, had now attracted the attention of more than just the galactic empires. There were whispers among the stars, rumors of even older civilizations, ones far more ancient and powerful than the empires we had already encountered. These were the real players, the ones who had long ago mastered forces beyond the understanding of even the Wrecks and Zaltai. And they were coming. The leaders of Earth faced the impossible task of deciding how to deal with this situation. There were those who believed that humanity needed to assert its newfound power, to show the galaxy that we would not be subjugated or controlled. We had survived by our wits and resilience, and now we had something that made us truly unique, an ancient force that could reshape the very fabric of existence. There were even those who thought that this might be the beginning of humanity's rise to dominance across the galaxy, that we could become the architects of a new order. But not everyone shared this vision. There were others who feared the consequences of this power, who warned that humanity was playing with forces that could unravel everything. The energy surges had already begun to destabilize star systems, to fracture the natural order of space-time. Some predicted that if we didn't find a way to control this power, it would eventually consume everything, the galaxy, the universe itself, spiraling into chaos. These voices argued that humanity had unknowingly become a beacon for something far more dangerous, something that could destroy not only us but everything in its path. The debates raged on, but in the midst of the uncertainty, a final decision had to be made. Earth's leaders, with the help of the Wrecks and Sultai, developed a plan to contain the energy surges. The theory was simple but perilous. If they could construct a massive, multi-layered containment field around Earth, they might be able to prevent the energy from continuing to spread and destabilize the galaxy. It would be a monumental task, one that would require the combined efforts of all the galaxy's powers, the collaboration of their fleets, and the unprecedented cooperation of every scientist and engineer humanity could muster. But the risk was immense. If the containment failed, if the power escaped, the consequences would be catastrophic. Meanwhile, the strange occurrences that had begun to plague Earth intensified. People began to experience phenomena that went beyond anything that could be explained by science or logic. Individuals would suddenly fall into deep trances, speaking in tongues, reciting knowledge of alien civilizations they had never encountered. Others began to manifest physical changes, eyes glowing with unnatural light, voices that reverberated with a strange resonance, even the occasional display of raw, destructive energy. It was as though the power within humanity was evolving, becoming more refined and potent. The question was no longer whether humanity had the potential to change the galaxy, it was whether we could control the change once it began. As the containment effort began, the first signs of external interference became evident. The ancient civilizations, those whispers from the stars, had arrived. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, massive, their presence filling the space like an ancient, living shadow. Their technologies were incomprehensible, their ships bending the laws of physics in ways that made even the most advanced human designs look like child's toys. These were not fleets that had come to negotiate, nor were they here to observe. They were here to take. They came from beyond the galaxy, their ships cutting through the stars with a grace that defied all logic. The containment project had barely begun when their ships emerged from the darkness surrounding Earth, cutting off all escape routes. Their presence was overwhelming, and there was no mistaking the intention behind their arrival. They were here to claim the power that had been unleashed, to harness it for their own purposes, to bend it to their will. Humanity's leaders, faced with the overwhelming reality of this new threat, made a desperate call for help. The Vrex and Zeltai fleets, having witnessed the power Earth could wield, were now our reluctant allies. They moved quickly, aligning their forces with Earth's remaining defense fleets, preparing for a confrontation on a scale no one had ever imagined. The ancient civilizations that had arrived were not just threats to Earth, they were threats to the galaxy itself. The power we had unlocked had drawn them out of hiding, and now they were determined to take it. The battle that ensued was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The skies over Earth erupted in a blinding display of energy as the fleets collided, their weapons creating shockwaves that rattled the very core of the planet. For a moment, it seemed as though humanity might be crushed beneath the weight of the forces arrayed against us. But then something unexpected happened. The power within us, this ancient force we had awakened, began to respond, to resonate with the energy of the galaxy's most powerful fleets. It was as though humanity had finally found its place in the cosmos, tapping into a source of strength beyond any single species. The energy surges began to intensify, not as a destructive force, but as a defense and energy barrier that pushed back against the ancient civilizations, holding them at bay. But even as the battle raged, it was clear that this was not the end. Humanity had proven that we could fight, that we could survive, but the true test had only just begun. The ancient civilizations were not defeated, not by a long shot. Their ships retreated, but they did not leave. They had seen the power humanity now wielded, and they would return. Earth had become a battleground, a prize worth fighting for, and in the coming days, weeks, and years, the galaxy would learn the true cost of awakening something that had been hidden for so long. And so, as the galaxy watched from the edges of the unknown, humanity stood at a crossroads. Our destiny was no longer in our hands alone. The power we had unleashed was now part of a greater cosmic struggle, one in which the stakes were higher than we could have ever imagined. What we did next would determine not only our future but the future of the universe itself. The last fleet that had challenged Earth had been driven back, but they would return, and we would be ready. The true war had only just begun. As the last remnants of the battle faded into the void, one thing became clear. Humanity had stepped into a new era. The galaxy, once indifferent to our existence, was now watching us closely, waiting for us to reveal what we would do next. The power we had unlocked could either be our salvation or our downfall. The ancient forces that had once been dormant were now stirring, and the choice was ours whether we would rise to the challenge or be consumed by it. The universe was no longer a distant frontier, it was now our battlefield. And with every decision we made, the stakes grew higher. What would humanity do with the power we had unleashed? Would we become the masters of our own destiny, or would we fall prey to forces far beyond our understanding? The galaxy's great powers had taken notice, and they would not forget. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a beacon. The question is, will we be its light, or will we be swallowed by the darkness? Stay tuned, and remember, this is just the beginning. The next chapter of humanity's story is yet to be written. And when it is, you can bet it'll be one for the ages. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and keep exploring the horizon, because the universe is far more unpredictable than we ever imagined.